Owen had never seen so many alien faces turn pale at the same time. The lecture hall of Station Meridian 9 fell into an uncomfortable silence as Professor Krill displayed the holographic battle above the students' heads. Hundreds of tiny ships surrounded a single planet, cutting off all routes in and out, while the defenders slowly starved below. "This, students, is the Siege of Antares," Professor Krill announced, his silver scales gleaming under the artificial lights. "Commander Vorth's greatest achievement, a perfectly executed blockade that lasted 6 months with minimal Alliance casualties." Owen shifted in his seat, trying to ignore the nervous glances from his Vraxian and Talarian classmates. Behind him, Sergeant Briggs sat with arms crossed, watching everything with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many wars. The war supervisor requirement still felt insulting to Owen, like humans couldn't be trusted to learn history without adult supervision. "The defenders had no choice but to surrender," Krill continued, manipulating the hologram to show supply ships being turned away. "Vorth's discipline and patience saved countless lives by avoiding direct combat." Owen's hand went up before he could stop himself. Krill's eyes fixed on him with something between concern and curiosity. "Yes, Owen." "Why didn't they break the siege?" Owen asked. Several students sucked in sharp breaths. Curix, a Talarian girl with 4 arms, actually moved her desk away from Owen slightly. "Break it how?" Krill seemed genuinely confused. "The Alliance had 3 times the ships. Any attempt to fight through would have been suicide." "Not fight through," Owen said, leaning forward. "Hit the supply lines. The blockading fleet needed food, fuel, ammunition. Where were those coming from?" Krill blinked. "From Alliance supply depots, naturally, but those were heavily guarded." "Doesn't matter. Send fast ships, maybe just missiles, to force the Alliance to spread their forces protecting logistics. Make them choose between maintaining the blockade and protecting their rear." Owen was warming to the topic now. "Or better yet, use civilian ships to sneak out refugees while pretending to comply. The Alliance couldn't search every single vessel without looking like monsters to the galactic community." The professor's scales had gone from silver to a dull gray. Such tactics would be considered dishonorable. The Alliance was following proper siege protocols. "Protocols?" Owen couldn't keep the edge from his voice. 40,000 soldiers and 15,000 civilians died from starvation and disease. That's in your own data. How is that honorable? "Those deaths were regrettable, but they chose not to surrender." Krill's tone had gone stiff. "Civilized warfare requires accepting defeat when the outcome is inevitable." Sergeant Briggs stirred in the back row. Owen saw him shake his head slightly, a clear warning to drop it. Owen ignored him. "Humans don't work like that," Owen said, standing up. "We had a city called Leningrad, surrounded for 872 days. People ate bread made from sawdust. They burned furniture to stay warm. Over 1 million died, but they never surrendered." The classroom had gone deathly quiet. Curix was staring at Owen like he had grown a second head. "That's barbaric," a Centauri student whispered. "That's survival," Owen shot back. "You know what happened to the army that besieged Leningrad? They lost. The siege failed because humans made it so expensive that the enemy couldn't sustain it. Meanwhile, you're celebrating a siege where the attackers barely got scratched while civilians starved." Professor Krill's voice rose. "The defenders at Antares could have prevented those deaths by surrendering earlier. That is the rational choice." "Rational?" Owen felt something cold settle in his chest. "You want to know what humans call rational? We call it rational to make the enemy regret ever attacking us. We call it rational to ensure that even if we lose, the cost is so high they'll think twice before trying again." "That is madness," Krill said flatly. "No," Briggs spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the tension. "That's why I'm here, to remind you that humans define victory differently than you do." Owen pulled up Earth's military history on his datapad and threw it to the main display. Images of sieges, battles, desperate last stands filled the air above the students. Stalingrad, Bostonia, the Alamo, Thermopylae. You see patience and discipline, Owen said, gesturing at the Antares siege. I see a failure of imagination. Those defenders could have turned every building into a fortress. They could have made resupply so dangerous the Alliance would have to assault the planet directly. They could have broadcast the starvation to the galaxy and turned public opinion against the Alliance. Instead, they just sat there and died politely. Enough, Krill slammed his hand on the podium. You speak of warfare as if it were a puzzle to solve, not a tragedy to minimize. War is always a tragedy, Owen said quietly. But between being conquered and making your enemy bleed for every centimeter, humans choose bleeding. Every time. Because the next enemy sees what happened and thinks maybe they should try diplomacy instead. A student raised a trembling hand. You would really keep fighting even when you knew you would lose. Owen met her eyes. We would make sure that their victory was so costly, so Pyrrhic, that they would spend generations recovering. That's not madness. That's making sure the next war never happens because nobody wants to pay that price again. Professor Krill stood frozen, his scales now almost white. Behind Owen, Briggs was on his feet. Class dismissed, Krill said hoarsely. The students fled. Curix paused at the door, looking back at Owen with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. Owen couldn't tell. Briggs walked up and put a hand on Owen's shoulder. That's why they need me here, he said softly. Because you just explained human warfare to people who haven't fought a real war in 3 centuries, and you scared them. Owen looked at the hologram of Antares still floating in the air. They should be scared, he said. Not of us, of what happens when someone who doesn't play by their rules shows up. Yeah, Briggs agreed. That's exactly what worries them. The security office felt smaller than it should have been. Owen sat across from Director Harth while the Claxian administrator's compound eyes reviewed footage from the classroom incident for the 3rd time. Sergeant Briggs stood by the window, watching evacuation shuttles drift past the station. 3 formal complaints, Harth said, his antennae drooping. The students claim they felt threatened by your description of human warfare tactics. I answered questions about military history, Owen protested. That's literally what the class is about. You described civilians eating sawdust and called it survival, Harth countered. You discussed making enemies bleed for every centimeter. These concepts are disturbing to species who haven't experienced total war in millennia. Briggs turned from the window. With respect, Director, the kid told the truth, if that's disturbing. Maybe your curriculum needs updating. Harth's antennae twitched. Perhaps that is actually why I called you here. He pulled up another file. 3 years ago, before the war supervisor protocols, we invited a human historian to give a guest lecture. Owen leaned forward. What happened? Dr. Walsh happened, Harth said grimly. He played the recording. The lecture hall was packed with eager students from dozens of species. Dr. Walsh stood at the podium, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She started with early human warfare, tribal conflicts, and Bronze Age battles. The students took notes enthusiastically. Then she reached the 20th century. Total war, Walsh explained calmly, is when the entire society becomes part of the war effort. Factories, civilians, infrastructure. Everything becomes a legitimate target because everything contributes to the enemy's ability to fight. A Centauri student raised his hand. Surely there were rules, protections for non-combatants. Walsh smiled sadly. They were often ignored. Let me show you what total war looked like. The hologram displayed burning cities. Walsh narrated in the same calm, educational tone she had used for everything else. Strategic bombing campaigns, atomic weapons, entire populations displaced or destroyed. She explained the logic behind each decision, the military necessity, the cost-benefit calculations. Students began leaving, some were crying. A Vraxian stood up, scales pale. How did your species survive knowing you were capable of this? Walsh's answer was simple. We survived because we learned from it, because we made sure it could never happen between humans again, because we channeled that capability into protection rather than conquest. Would you use such tactics against us? Another student demanded. Walsh paused. Owen could see her choosing her words carefully. We would prefer not to, but if humanity's survival depended on it, if our children's lives were at stake, yes, we would do whatever was necessary. The lecture hall emptied. Walsh stood alone at the podium, still holding her notes for a lecture that no one wanted to hear. Harth stopped the recording. Within 2 days, 17 species threatened to vote for humanity's expulsion from the galactic community. They called humans psychologically incompatible with peaceful coexistence. Owen felt cold. What changed there? Minds. The Council's military analysts, Harth said. They reviewed Earth's complete history. What they found terrified them more than Walsh's lecture. He pulled up a classified report. Owen read through it, his stomach sinking with each paragraph. Every human is a potential soldier. No warrior caste, no specialized combat species, just ordinary people who can become warriors when necessary. Genetic memory of ancestors who survived ice ages by being more stubborn than their environment. Cultural celebration of last stands and hopeless defenses. Educational systems that teach children about sacrifice and the price of freedom. They realize something, Harth continued. Most species have soldiers, humans have survivors, there's a difference. Briggs nodded slowly. We don't fight until we win. We fight until the threat is gone, even if we have to go through hell to do it. Exactly, Harth said. And that's why the war supervisor protocols were created, not to control human students, to reassure everyone else that someone is monitoring the situation. Owen looked at Briggs. You're a security blanket. Basically, Briggs admitted. I'm here so the other students feel safe. When you start talking about acceptable casualty ratios and strategic depth, they look at me and remember that not all humans are warriors. Some of us know when to stop. Do you? Owen asked quietly. Briggs met his eyes. I know when to stop fighting. I don't know when to stop protecting what matters. That's the distinction most species can't understand. Harth brought up medical reports. 4 students suffered anxiety attacks after Walsh's lecture. They required psychological counseling. The concept of total war, of willingly sacrificing civilians for military objectives, broke something in their worldview. We don't sacrifice civilians, Owen said sharply. We protect them. Everything in those tactics was about survival, not conquest. The intent doesn't matter to someone experiencing the result, Harth replied. When your city is burning, the reason why is less important than the fact that it's burning. Owen slumped in his chair. So what happens now? Do I get expelled? No, Harth said. You continue your education, but you must submit questions in writing before class. Briggs will review them to ensure they won't cause distress, and you will attend additional sessions on galactic military philosophy. 2. Learn how civilized species fight, Owen said bitterly. To learn why we fight the way we do, Harth corrected. Your species fights for survival because Earth gave you no choice. Our species fight for resources or ideology because our worlds were kinder. Neither approach is wrong, but understanding the difference prevents incidents. Briggs put a hand on Owen's shoulder. The galaxy needs to understand humans, and humans need to understand why our approach scares them. This works both ways, kid. Owen nodded slowly. Fine, when do these sessions start? Tomorrow, Harth said. Professor Krill has volunteered to teach you personally. Owen's eyebrows rose. After I terrified his class. Because you terrified his class, Harth corrected. He wants to understand why, and maybe help you understand why that terror isn't entirely unreasonable. Briggs smiled slightly. Welcome to cultural exchange, kid. It's not always comfortable. Owen stood to leave, then paused. Director, what happened to Dr. Walsh? Harth's antennae drooped again. She resigned. Said she couldn't teach students who weren't ready to hear the truth. Last I heard, she was back on Earth, writing a book about the incident. Owen walked out with Briggs. As they headed down the corridor, Owen asked quietly, Did we make a mistake? joining the galactic community. Briggs considered. No, but we reminded them that the universe isn't always safe, and that survival sometimes requires becoming what you'd rather not be. That's a hard lesson, especially for species that forgot it. Professor Krill's private office was nothing like Owen expected. Instead of the sterile academic space he imagined, the room overflowed with holographic displays showing Earth's military history. Battles from every era floated in the air like ghosts demanding attention. "Sit," Krill said without looking up from a projection of Stalingrad. "I have been studying your species for 72 hours straight. I cannot sleep." Owen glanced at Briggs, who shrugged and took a seat by the door. Owen sat across from the Vraxian professor, noticing the dull gray of his scales and the exhaustion in his eyes. "You look terrible," Owen said. "I feel terrible," Krill admitted. "Your species has fought more wars in 5,000 years than mine has in 50,000, and yet Earth is not a wasteland. How?" "We rebuild," Owen said simply. "Sometimes better than before." Krill pulled up a comparison chart. The Battle of Thermopylae, 300 Spartans against thousands. They died to the last warrior. You celebrate this. "We celebrate the stand they made," Owen corrected. "They bought time for Greece to prepare. Their sacrifice mattered." "They died for nothing," Krill insisted. "Sparta fell eventually. Persia conquered Greece. The strategic value of the stand was minimal." Briggs spoke up. "You're looking at it wrong, Professor. Those 300 men showed that Persia could be fought, that their massive army could bleed, that Greeks didn't have to surrender just because the odds looked bad. The morale impact rippled through every battle that followed." Krill stared at the hologram. "You measure victory in terms beyond territory and casualties." "We measure it in what comes after," Owen said. "Did our sacrifice buy time? Did it inspire others? Did it make the enemy think twice? Those matter as much as who held the field at the end." The professor pulled up another battle. The Alamo, defenders knew they would die. New reinforcements would not arrive in time. They fought anyway. Why? "Remember the Alamo?" Owen quoted. "Those words rallied Texas. The defenders died, but their stand became a symbol that brought more fighters than any victory could have. Sometimes losing a battle wins the war." Krill's scales rippled. "This is insane. You are describing defeat as victory." "We're describing sacrifice as meaningful," Briggs corrected. "There's a difference. If your people were facing extinction, wouldn't you fight even when the numbers said you should quit?" "We would negotiate, find a compromise. Survival through diplomacy is always preferable to death through combat." Krill pulled up footage from the Warsaw Uprising. This I cannot understand. The Polish resistance knew they would lose, knew the Soviets would not help, knew the Germans would destroy the city, yet they fought for 63 days. The city was erased. 200,000 died. For what?" Owen's voice went quiet. "So that even in defeat, they proved they were not conquered. So that their oppressors would remember that some people cannot be broken. So that future generations would know their ancestors fought back." "That is not strategy," Krill said desperately. "That is suicide with extra steps." "That is humanity," Owen replied. "We are the species that looked at ice ages and decided to migrate north. That survived plagues by isolating our own families. That walked on the moon because someone said it was impossible. We do not accept inevitable. We make the universe reconsider what inevitable means." Krill sat down heavily. "The Council is right to fear you." "Why?" Owen demanded. "We have not threatened anyone." "Because you do not need to threaten," Krill said. "Your entire existence is a threat to the galaxy's understanding of rational behavior. We built a civilization on compromise and calculation. You built one on stubbornness and sacrifice. What happens when those philosophies collide?" Briggs leaned forward. "Professor, why did you really ask us here?" Krill hesitated, then pulled up a classified file. "The periphery signals, you have heard of them." Owen nodded. Strange transmissions from unexplored space had been a topic of speculation for months. "They are not random," Krill said. "We decoded them. They are territorial warnings from a species we have not encountered, a species claiming massive regions of space that include inhabited systems. The Council is preparing diplomatic contact. And if diplomacy fails? Briggs asked. Krill's scales went pale. We ran simulations. Our military forces are designed for limited conflicts with other galactic species, all of whom follow similar conventions and restraints. If this new species does not follow those rules, if they fight like... He looked at Owen. If they fight like humans. You lose, Owen finished. Every simulation ends with catastrophic casualties, Krill confirmed. Our admirals do not know how to fight an enemy that does not care about acceptable loss ratios, that might use kamikaze tactics or total war strategies, that views surrender as weakness rather than wisdom. Owen felt cold understanding creep through him. You want us to teach you? I want to understand, Krill said. If the galaxy faces an enemy that fights for absolute victory rather than favorable terms, we need to know how to respond. But I am terrified of what happens if we adopt human warfare philosophy. Will we become what you are? Survivors who celebrate last stands and sacrifice children's lives for symbolic victories. We don't sacrifice children, Briggs said sharply. We protect them. Everything we do, every stand we make is so the next generation can live in peace. You think we celebrate war, we mourn it, but we do not. Shy from it when the alternative is worse. Krill pulled up Earth's memorials, Arlington, the Vietnam Wall, countless others. You build monuments to your dead. So we remember the cost, Owen said. So we never forget that war is not glorious. It is necessary sometimes, but never glorious. Those monuments exist so we think twice before starting the next war. An alarm cut through the conversation. Krill's interface flashed with an emergency broadcast. His scales went white. The diplomatic vessel reached the signal source. He looked up at Owen and Briggs. The new species responded. What did they say? Owen asked. Krill played the transmission. A harsh, guttural voice spoke through the translator. This space is claimed, leave or be removed. They destroyed one of our ships when it deployed a scanning probe, Krill whispered. No warning, no negotiation, just destruction. Briggs stood up. Professor, what are the new species called? The Kresh, Krill said. We made first contact 600 years ago. It went badly. They rejected all diplomatic overtures and withdrew to their own territory. Now they are back. Owen stared at the tactical display showing the Kresh fleet. The formation looked wrong, too aggressive, too ready for sustained combat. They fight like us, he said quietly. Yes, Krill confirmed, and the Council has no idea how to stop them. The evacuation sirens wailed through Station Meridian 9 as Owen pressed his face against the observation window. Dozens of human transports streamed away from the docking bays while alien students and faculty watched with growing dread. Your ride leaves in 90 minutes, Briggs said, checking his tactical pad. Earth Command wants all civilians back to defensive positions. What about them? Owen gestured to the crowds in the corridor. Vraxian students huddled together, Centauri faculty argued frantically, Talarian workers tried to maintain order. The station only has enough evacuation capacity for 60% of the population. Briggs grimaced. The Council is working on it. Working on it? Owen turned on him. The Kresh fleet is 20 hours away. Working on it is not good enough. It's not our problem, kid, Briggs said, but his voice lacked conviction. Owen made a decision. I am staying. No, Briggs grabbed his arm. You are a civilian student, not military. You do not get to make that call. Someone needs to help organize the evacuation, Owen said. I know this station's layout. I have crisis management training, and everyone is too panicked to think straight. Briggs stared at him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his communicator and called Earth Command. The conversation was brief. When he disconnected, his expression was grim. We are both staying, he said. But if this goes bad, you follow my orders exactly, understood? Owen nodded. Director Harth's emergency assembly filled the main hall with hundreds of terrified people. The Klaxian administrator tried to project calm, but his antennae trembled visibly. "The Kresh fleet will arrive in approximately 19 hours, Harth announced. "The Council has authorized evacuation for all non-essential personnel. Please proceed to your designated assembly points in an orderly fashion." A Centauri professor shouted from the crowd, "There are not enough ships. The mathematics are clear. Some of us will be left behind." Panic rippled through the assembly. Harth raised his hands for calm, but the noise only grew louder. Owen pushed through the crowd and climbed onto the platform. Briggs cursed and followed. Owen grabbed the microphone before anyone could stop him. "Listen," his voice cut through the chaos. "Panicking kills more people than actual disasters. I need everyone to calm down and think." "Who are you to give orders?" someone shouted. "I am the human who stays while his own species evacuates," Owen replied. "I am the human who is going to help coordinate this mess, and I am asking for your cooperation." The crowd quieted slightly. Curix pushed to the front, her four arms gesturing emphatically. "What can you do that the director cannot?" "I can organize a proper evacuation protocol," Owen said. "The kind humans use during disasters, triage and prioritization. It is not pretty, but it works." Harth looked ready to object, then seemed to realize he had no better option. "Proceed." Owen pulled up the station schematic on the main display. "Medical personnel and students report to the infirmary to prepare for potential casualties. Engineering teams check all docking systems and life support redundancies. Everyone else divides into groups based on your skills. If you can pilot, navigate, or manage logistics, front and center. If you have no specialized skills, you help where directed. No arguments, no debates. Move." The crowd hesitated, then Curix stepped forward. "I am a medical student. I will help at the infirmary." Others began moving, slowly at first, then with purpose. Briggs watched with something like pride. "You just took command of a civilian evacuation without authorization." "Court-martial me later," Owen said. "Right now, I need you to assess our defensive capabilities, just in case." "In case of what?" Briggs asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "In case the Kresh do not let us evacuate peacefully." 12 hours later, Owen had transformed the chaos into organized efficiency. Evacuation schedules were optimized. Supply distribution was streamlined. The station's limited defensive systems were being tested and prepared. Professor Krill found Owen in what had become an impromptu command center. The Vraxian looked exhausted and worried. "The Council has established contact with the Kresh fleet," Krill said. "They are demanding we abandon this sector entirely. All stations, all colonies, everything within 50 light-years." "What did the Council say?" Owen asked. "They are negotiating." Krill sat down heavily. "But the Kresh are not interested in compromise. They want submission or conflict. There is no middle ground." Briggs entered with a tactical report. "Station defenses are a joke. Point defense lasers meant for asteroids, basic shields, emergency bulkheads. We could maybe hold off a pirate raid against a military fleet." He shook his head. An alarm blared. Director Harth's voice came over the station-wide system. "All personnel, the diplomatic mission has failed. One of our vessels has been destroyed. The Kresh fleet is advancing. All remaining civilians must evacuate immediately." Owen checked the evacuation status. They were at 78%. Over 800 people were still aboard. The remaining transports could take maybe 300 more. Curix appeared in the doorway. "I am staying," she announced. "So are 30 other students. We volunteer to help." "This is not your fight," Owen said. "You made it our fight when you stayed to help us," Curix replied. "You taught us that surrender is a choice. We choose to stand with you." Briggs looked at the gathered students. "Do you understand what you are volunteering for? This is not a classroom discussion. If the Kresh attack, people will die." "We understand," a Centauri student said. "You showed us that sometimes survival means." "Fighting back, we are scared, but we are not abandoning our station." Owen felt something shift inside him. These students, these aliens who had been terrified of human warfare philosophy just days ago, were choosing to stand because of what he had taught them. "Then we prepare," he said. "Briggs, show them how to defend a position. Professor Krill, you coordinate with remaining faculty. Director Harth." He looked at the Klaxian. "You are about to see why humans study siege warfare." Harth's antennae drooped. "The Council will not approve resistance. They want to appear non-threatening." "The Council is not here," Owen said flatly. "We are, and we have 6 hours before the Kresh arrive. Briggs, start with basic corridor defense. These kids are not soldiers, but they can learn to survive." As the students filed out to begin training, Krill approached Owen. "You realize what you have done. You have turned civilians into combatants, violated every galactic convention on warfare." Owen met his eyes. "I turned scared kids into survivors. There is a difference. And when this is over, the Council can debate the ethics. Right now, we focus on making sure there is an after." The Kresh fleet appeared on long-range sensors, 17 warships in attack formation. The lead vessel broadcast a simple message: "Surrender your station. You have 1 hour." Briggs stood beside Owen at the tactical display. "Last chance to run, kid." Owen looked at the students manning barricades, at the volunteers coordinating supplies, at the station that had become something worth defending. "Humans do not run when people need protecting," he said. "You taught me that." Briggs smiled grimly. "Then let us show these Kresh why the galaxy fears human stubbornness." Director Harth stared at the surrender demand with visible dread. 1 hour to abandon a station that still held 4,000 people. The mathematics of impossibility had never been clearer. "If we surrender, they might allow evacuation to continue," Professor Krill suggested, his scales pale gray. Owen shook his head. "They destroyed a diplomatic ship without warning. They are not interested in mercy. They want capitulation." "What choice do we have?" Harth's antennae sagged. "The Galactic Defense Fleet needs 4 hours to arrive. We only have 1. Briggs studied the tactical display. "Then we buy 3 hours." He looked at Owen. "You ready for this?" Owen thought about everything that had led to this moment. The classroom debates, the terrified students, the realization that sometimes survival meant doing things you had been told were impossible. "Tell them no," Owen said to Harth. The director hesitated. "The Council orders us to avoid confrontation." "The Council is not here," Owen repeated. "We are, and I am not letting these people die because bureaucrats want to avoid embarrassment." Harth transmitted the refusal. "Station Meridian 9 is a civilian facility with no military value. We request peaceful withdrawal." The Kresh response came immediately. "Request denied. Surrender or be boarded 30 minutes." The evacuation accelerated to desperation. Every transport was overloaded. Children and elderly went first, then injured and sick. Owen organized it with ruthless efficiency while Briggs prepared defensive positions. The student volunteers manned barricades in the main corridors. Curix coordinated medical supplies. Engineers sealed non-essential sections to create defensible zones. It was not enough. Owen knew it was not enough. But it was something. The Kresh assault pods launched, 20 small craft streaking toward the station's docking bays. Station defenses activated. Point defense lasers designed for slow asteroids struggled to track military-grade assault vehicles. 3 pods were destroyed. 17 reached their targets. "They are breaching the outer sections," Briggs reported. "Multiple entry points, we cannot defend them all." Owen made the call. "Seal the outer ring. Everyone fall back to the core sections. We hold what we can and abandon the rest." Emergency bulkheads slammed down. 70% of the station was surrendered without a fight. The remaining 30% became their fortress. The Kresh soldiers moved through the abandoned sections with professional efficiency. Station cameras showed them clearly for the first time. Bipedal, heavily armored, moving in coordinated fire teams. They looked almost human in their tactical discipline. Briggs watched the footage. They fight like humans, he confirmed. Squad tactics, fire and movement, methodical clearing, this is going to be bad. The first contact came in Corridor 7. Station security opened fire. The Kresh took cover and returned precise shots. They were not rushing. They were clearing each section systematically. Owen's barricade slowed them. Not much, but enough. Each corridor became a small battlefield. The defenders fell back in stages, making the Kresh work for every meter. Curix's medical team treated the first casualties. Minor wounds, mostly. The Kresh were not trying to kill, they were trying to capture. That worried Owen more than aggression would have. They want the station intact, he told Briggs. That is why they are being careful. Which means they need it for something, Briggs agreed. Probably as a forward base for whatever comes next. 2 hours into the battle, the Kresh reached the reactor level. Briggs had positioned the best defenders there. Students who had never held weapons 3 days ago now crouched behind barricades with plasma rifles. Owen moved among them. Remember your training, fire, move, cover. Do not try to be heroes, just delay them. A Centauri student was shaking so hard he could barely hold his weapon. Owen knelt beside him. Fear means you are alive, use it. Let it make you careful, not frozen. The student nodded. Thank you for teaching us this. Thank me when we survive, Owen said. The Kresh assault on the reactor level was fierce. Professional soldiers against terrified students. It should have been over in minutes. It took them 43 minutes to advance 50 meters. Every barricade cost them time. Every corridor became a killing ground. The students were not winning. They were not even fighting well by military standards. But they were too stubborn to quit. Briggs took a plasma burn covering a retreat. Owen dragged him to cover while Curix and 2 others provided fire. The sergeant was still conscious, still giving orders. Left flank is collapsing, he gasped. Need to reinforce or fall back. Owen looked at the tactical display. The Kresh were pushing hard. In 10 minutes they would breach the reactor core. In 20 they would control the station. Then proximity alarms blared. The Galactic Defense Fleet dropped out of FTL. Hundreds of ships surrounded Station Meridian 9. The Kresh forces inside the station suddenly found themselves trapped. Their fleet was outnumbered 3-1. A communication came through. The Kresh fleet commander, war leader Drenth, hailed the Galactic Fleet. We propose ceasefire, allow our forces to withdraw, and we depart peacefully. The Galactic Admiral agreed. Nobody wanted to fight inside a civilian station. Drenth broadcast to his soldiers. They withdrew with the same discipline they had shown attacking. As the last Kresh shuttle departed, Drenth sent a final transmission. To the human coordinating the defense. His voice was harsh but respectful. You fought well. The Kresh honor courage. This battle is over, but the war begins soon. Prepare yourselves. Owen slumped against a wall as adrenaline faded. Around him, students were crying, laughing, holding each other. They had survived. Professor Krill found Owen in the medical bay hours later. The station was secure. Casualties were being counted. Repairs were beginning. 37 injured, Krill said quietly. 5 dead, all security personnel who held positions so students could evacuate. He sat down. I understand now. Understand what? Owen asked. Why you need supervisors, not to protect us from your violence, to protect us from your example. Krill gestured at the students who had fought. They will remember this. They will remember that surrender is optional, that civilians can become defenders, that sometimes you fight not because you can win, but because the alternative is worse. Owen looked at his hands. They were still shaking. Is that bad? I do not know, Krill admitted. The galaxy is changing. The Kresh proved that peaceful coexistence is not guaranteed. Perhaps we need to remember how to fight, but I fear what we might become. 6 months later, Owen stood in a new classroom. The Galactic Military Academy had been hastily expanded. Human instructors taught alien cadets. Briggs was there, fully recovered, teaching tactical defense. Professor Krill began his lecture. Today we discuss the siege of Station Meridian 9, the battle that changed galactic military doctrine. Owen sat in the front row. Beside him sat Curix and a dozen other survivors. Krill displayed footage of the defense. Notice the tactics: layered retreats, fortified positions, willingness to trade space for time. These are human concepts applied by non-human defenders. The results speak for themselves. A student raised his hand. Professor, was this victory or defeat? Krill smiled. Both and neither. The station was nearly captured, but it held long enough. 5 died, but thousands survived. The creche withdrew, but they promised to return. He looked at Owen. This is the human understanding of warfare. Victory is not about winning. It is about ensuring the cost of aggression exceeds its value, about making the enemy think twice before trying again. Owen raised his hand. Krill called on him. What happened to war leader Drenth? Krill pulled up intelligence reports. The creche opened diplomatic channels. Drenth's report stated that galactic species were not weak, merely unprepared. Now that we are preparing, they must reconsider their plans. He paused. Sometimes the best victory is the war that never happens because both sides know the cost would be too high. Briggs stood from the back. That is the real lesson. We did not win because we fought better. We won because we survived long enough to make fighting pointless. He looked at the class. Sometimes that is the only victory that matters. Class ended. Students filed out discussing tactics and philosophy. Owen stayed behind. Professor Krill approached him. Do you regret it? Krill asked. Teaching the galaxy how to fight. Owen considered. I regret that we had to, but I do not regret that we could. The universe is not always kind. Sometimes survival requires strength. As long as we remember the cost, as long as we build memorials and mourn the dead, we are not becoming monsters. We are just refusing to be victims. Krill nodded slowly. Then perhaps there is hope for all of us.